Hello and welcome to Sharing Jewish Wisdom.
Right, hello everybody, nice to have you all back again. And yes, we are going to talk about Purim because it's coming up pretty close, as it normally does on the 14th of Adar. So in our workshop, we're going to look today at the story, the background, and some interesting little peaky moments in the story. And then we're going to run through the do's and don'ts of Purim. There we are. So pay attention, listen carefully, sit back and enjoy. Or maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. So, where is Purim referred to? Well, it's in Megillah Esther, the Megillah that we read, the scroll that we read on Purim. Now, this name Esther has quite a lot behind it. Esther, we know, means hidden or concealed. And the root of it is a line in the book of Deuteronomy, in Devarim, where Hashem says, Hastir Hastir Panai Mehem, the time will come when I will hide my face from you. And if you read carefully right through the Megillah, there's no direct reference to Almighty God at all. We'll come to that a little bit later. Okay, so the Megillah is written in the same way that a Sefer Torah is written. It's on cloth, it's on parchment, it's written by a sofer using traditional inks, except that when it's opened up for the person who's going to read it, it's opened up and folded like a letter, because towards the end of the Megillah, we read that when we had been victorious and Haman and his plan was defeated, and the date for the annihilation of the Jews had passed and we were saved, then what happened was that letters were sent out to all the Jewish communities in the empire of Ahasuerus, being 127 provinces, as we know from chapter 1. And that's how it's folded and unfolded, as if this was being repeated now and that the event of the miracle was being refreshed for us. So it's not just a history, it's something with which we engage right now. Okay, so where did it happen? Well, it happened in the empire of King Ahasuerus, or Ahasuerus if you prefer it in the vernacular. He married a lady called Vashti. And Vashti was, if I get it right, the great-granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Ahasuerus was a little bit of a nothing, if the truth be told. He'd risen in the ranks of the army, but he wanted something that would, if you like, give credibility to his position, and thus marrying the great-granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar made him look a lot more suitable as a king. So that's where all that comes from. And we can perhaps empathize to some extent because, of course, the events of Purim in Persia took place during the first exile. And therefore, the Jews there were refugees. Well, look around now and you can see a parallel with lots of peoples in the world who have been driven out of their own land for one reason or another and are refugees in a foreign land with a foreign culture. There we go. So let's just run through the protagonists, the people involved. There was, as I said, Ahasuerus, the king, although there are references to the king from time to time in the Megillah, which I know that Mark will deal with a bit later on. Vashti, his queen, and we know that she refused to appear at the party that Ahasuerus put on. She was asked to come and appear in front of all the nobles and people wearing the crown of the queen, but more particularly just the crown of the queen. So in the Midrash Esther Rabbah, it explains that the Malach, the angel Gabriel, came down that day, struck her with soras, leprosy, and he also created a tail. So she certainly did not look the sort of person that the king would want showing off the beauty of his queen. And we know that she refused to attend, and that later, in a drunken fit, he murdered her.
Is that why we drink a lot on Purim? Is that part of or is that nothing to do with it?
Well, I would say it's a long tale. No, why we drink at Purim, I'm going to come on to later on, but it's a very good question. In fact, well, actually, no, maybe you've actually got a good point there, because wine is a very significant factor that runs through the thread of it. You see, it says in the Megillah, and you thought you caught me there with that question, didn't you? It says in the Megillah that the wine and the drink was handed out liberally by the king at the party, kirtzon ish for ish, each person according to what they wanted. So if somebody wanted a Merlot or a Cabernet Sauvignon or an Edgeware 69, then they could have it. The difficulty was that Mordecai, who's coming up now in my list of protagonists, who was, of course, originally the uncle of Esther, and it said later the husband of Esther, he was the head of the Sanhedrin. And he told the Jewish people in Persia, do not go to the party. This is not for us to mix. And as I'm sure you know, it's a tradition that if you go to a party put on by other people, we avoid anything like wine, but for obvious reasons. But in the end of it, he in fact went to the party to supervise the Jews who were there to make sure they behaved themselves. There's an old saying in the Gemara, Nichnas yain yotze soid. When the wine comes in, the secrets come out. And all this excessive drinking, not a good idea. Unless any of you watching want to buy something for me, in which case a nice bottle of semi-sweet white would go down a treat. It's wonderful over the cornflakes in the morning, sets me up for the whole day. Right, so that's Mordecai. Esther, we know she was an orphan and the cousin of Mordecai, and he took her in because both her parents had died. And finally, the villains of the piece, Haman, boo, and his delightful wife, Zeresh. Haman, of course, was promoted to prime minister and was given the king's ring to seal documents, and that's where all the trouble started. Okay, so what is the plot? So it's written in 10 chapters, and I've managed to get it down to about 7 lines. So I'm just going to read it to you, what we might call the condensed portable version of Purim. So there's the big party run by the king. Vashti refuses to play for him, and so she is disposed of, and he needs to search for a new queen. Around that time, Mordecai hears about 2 palace guards were plotting to assassinate Ahasuerus. He reveals the plot, and the guards are promptly executed. The details are written in the chronicles of the time, but nothing more than that. Haman then rises through the ranks, becomes appointed prime minister, and he says to the king, now look, he said, there's this people, Mufura and Mufurish, Mufuzah and Mufurish, they follow their own rules, they keep to themselves, they have their own way of life. They are, if you like, a nuisance. Let's get rid of them, and I will pay you a lot of money, Your Majesty, in order to do that. And the king foolishly says, well, look, I don't want the money. I don't need it. You want to do that, you get on with it. And so Haman draws lots. That's where Purim comes from. It draws lots and picks the 7th of Adar because that's the day he believes he can do it and accomplish the annihilation of the Jews. And also, of course, the 7th of Adar was the date when Moshe Rabbeinu died.
Even though it commemorates on the 14th of Adar.
That's when we can. Yes, something happened later on. You're quite right. But what he didn't realise was that Moshe Rabbeinu not only died on the 7th of Adar, but it was his birthday because he died exactly at the age of 120, and so it wasn't really that bad. So, meanwhile, Esther has been picked as a new queen, and Mordecai asks her to intercede with the king to try and stop this plot coming to be. So she arranges a party for the king and for Haman, and they both attend, and then she reveals, first of all, that she is a member of the Jewish people, which she kept quiet about before, and Haman's plot. The king is absolutely furious. Haman and his 10 sons are executed. And of course, we have the tradition that when the 10 sons are read in the Megillah, we try and do it in one breath to dispose of them suitably. Then Mordecai is replaced as the prime minister. And I would sort of say, but everybody lives happily ever after. There we are. That is it in a nutshell. And so the saga was reduced to writing in the form of the Megillah and then sent out to all the provinces of the king, which you can imagine took some time to get all that done. And the festival of Purim was instituted in the way that we still keep it today. And that, in essence, is what it's all about.
So I've got a bit of a question. I'm not sure if you know the answer. How many times is Purim in the Purim Megillah is Haman mentioned? Do you know the answer to that?
How many times is he mentioned? Well, that's interesting because he's mentioned in different ways. When he's first mentioned, he's referred to as Haman or Agogi. I believe that's right. And other times he's just mentioned as Haman. How many times in total, I can't tell you. We do, of course, have the custom that when his name is mentioned, in order to blot him out,
we have a clap.
We have a clap or a shout or whatever. Some people only do it when he is described. So if it just says Vayomer Haman, they don't shout. But when it says Haman Agogi or something like that, then they shout. And other people have the very interesting custom that on the base of their shoes in chalk, they write the name Haman. So as you walk along, you rub his name out.
Interesting.
Yes. Haman, of course, was descended from Amalek. And so, it fits in with the fact that that's what Amalek wanted to do to us. And Haman did the same thing. Right. Let's have a look at the rules and regs of Purim. We hear the Megillah night and day. It's read from a scroll, and you actually have to hear it. So it's no good just listening to a recording or hearing it down the phone or even through a microphone. You have to hear the voice of the reader.
Or through Zoom.
Right. No Zoom either. Very good. Yeah, you're right. There are brachas that are made when we read it, obviously. And in the daytime, we have to have in mind when we're making the brachas 3 essential do's on Purim day. And you'll say, what are they? I'm going to tell you in a minute. If you have no access to a Megillah that you can read for yourself or hear read, you can read it from a printed text, but brachas are not made over the printed text. So what are the things you've got to do? First of all, Mishloach Manot, the giving of 2 types of food to one person at least. It's an idea of fostering relations. Now, years ago, the way it used to work was not that you got this amazing, expensive, I don't know what you want to call it, with bottles of wine and 38 cakes and 14 bars of chocolate and whatever. You cannot possibly get through. What it used to be was that a neighbour would go to another neighbour with the Purim Seudah, the Purim meal, all made,
right.
and give them that and say, there you are.
Right.
Right, good idea. Right, so then Matanot La'Evyonim, we give charitable donations to at least 2 poor Jews or to organisations supporting poor Jews. And in London, because I don't know where our viewers are watching this, in London there are a number of people who guarantee that if you give him money on Purim Day, that same day it will reach poor people in Eretz Israel. Okay. And the eating of the Purim Seudah, the special meal that we have to mark Purim, and we put in our grace after meals, Alanissim, an extra paragraph marking Purim. Now, the Purim Seudah, and we come back to a point you made a little while ago, must involve the eating of meat and the drinking of wine.
Right.
So it all comes full circle. Has to be a nice fleshig Seudah. Okay?
Interesting.
You have to start the Seudah before sunset because, of course, it's on the day of Purim. And once you get past sunset, it becomes a bit iffy, as they say in the classics. So that's the Purim Seudah. And finally, something else you asked me about getting drunk.
Yes.
There is no actual mitzvah to get drunk. Most people will say, really? But no, you get to the stage where you don't know the difference between Baruch Mordecai, blessed be Mordecai, and Ora Haman, cursed be Haman. When you get to that stage that you can't quite tell the difference because of the amount of alcohol you've consumed, that's as far as you need to go. There is no requirement for anybody to be so sozzled they don't know if it's Purim or Tisha B'Av or Easter Monday. So no, that is a mistake. A lot of people believe that they can drink to excess. Well, if they want to, that's up to them. But they're not fulfilling any sort of mitzvah. And as personally, as a dedicated tea drinker, it doesn't really bother me at all. Good. So, have you got any questions or points you want to raise?
Yes, I found 5 little interesting facts. So Purim means lots. The name Purim comes from the Hebrew word for lots, referencing the casting of lots by the villain Haman to choose the day to kill the Jews. The book of Esther is unique because, unlike most biblical texts, the book of Esther doesn't mention God's name. Some scholars even believe the story might be fictional or based on an older Babylonian tale.
Oh, we're back to the tales again, are we? Well, actually, just let me comment on that, if I may.
I'd like you to.
As we said earlier on, God's name is not mentioned specifically anywhere in the Megillah. We hear about HaMelech Achashverosh, the king Achashverosh, but there are other times when the word HaMelech is used.
The king. And
some of our scholars believe that is in fact a hidden reference. To Almighty God. So the whole, what appears to be a set of coincidences that fall into place is in fact guided by God, but not overtly. So, for example, if we take the splitting of the Reed Sea, right, that was a very obvious, if I dare say, in-your-face example of God at work, very manifest. But with Purim, it's far more discreet, and as we know from the name Esther, it's hidden, it's concealed. Right, I interrupted.
That's fine. Right, so in Jerusalem, there's a double celebration because Purim is a day later than other places. This tradition comes from the story where the Jews in the capital city, Shushan, needed an extra day to fight back after the victory.
Right. So where there was a walled city, I believe in the time of Joshua, but I'm open to correction there. Where there was a walled city at that time, the walled city celebrates on Shushan Purim, whereas on Purim everybody else is. So out there in Eretz Yisrael, some people who like to be cheeky have Purim, if you like, on Purim, and they then come into Yerushalayim.
Oh,
right, and have a second Purim.
How interesting.
Yes, there you go. Not a bad idea, I have to say. Not a bad idea at all. I mean, 2 Purim Seudahs, 2 cups of tea, bottles of wine. I mean, God, it's quite exciting.
Well away.
Yeah, well away, you're telling me. But of course, it also means 2 sets of Mishloach Manot and 2 sets of Matanot La'Evyonim. So you don't get away that easy. Right, do go on.
So the final nugget to be taken away from Purim is the Humantashen treats. These delicious triangular cookies, filled with poppy seeds, jam or chocolates, are traditional Purim food. Some say their 3 corners symbolize Haman's hat, ears, or pockets.
Very good. The word Taschen comes from the German Tasch, which means a pocket.
Ah, right.
Haman's pockets, right? But I think the more popular version is Haman's ears, or indeed, as you say, his hat, because that was the traditional shape of a hat. In fact, if you look back in pictures and depictions, or let's say 200 years ago, you will see the tricorn hat was very much the fashion in this country. So nothing much changed. Yes, that's exactly right. The eating of Humantashen is a big part of Haman, and they fill them with poppy seeds and or jam and whatever it happens to be. Yes, they do go nicely with a cup of tea.
Exactly.
Not that I'm hinting, but if you're going to put the kettle on,
get on with it.
Right. There we go. I think that's it. I think we've given them all a good guide in this workshop. We hope that you all have a most amazing, uplifting, exciting Purim. And when you've sobered up, you'll probably remember some of this stuff that you've heard. But if you don't sober up, just remember, and here's a sobering thought, it's only a month to Pesach.
Please click the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for some great content.